Hi, boys and girls. It's Mrs. Rowell. Happy almost Halloween. So, I found this broom out in my front yard this morning and nobody was around. I don't know where it came from. It's very, very old looking and it's not mine. Do you think maybe it fell from the sky? Well, in our story today, we're going to be hearing The Widow's Broom, and it's by Chris VanAllsburg. And he's the one that wrote The Polar Express. He writes a bunch of wonderful books. He is also the illustrator as well. So today's story with The Widow's Broom, we're going to be having a little fun. And this is a trickster tale. And then we're just going to enjoy the art of storytelling because that's what Mrs. Rowell loves to do is tell stories. So witches' brooms sometimes, as reliable as they are, sometimes after a while they just run out of their magic. And brooms that used to fly super, super fast in the sky sometimes stop. But it usually gives a witch a warning, but every once in a while, for no reason, they just stop and they drop right out of the sky. And that's what happened this one time on a cold October night many years ago. And I'm going to show you some of the illustrations in the book because they're so amazing. So see, look, oh, there goes the broom. I see a hat, I see a cape, and I see some feet. And it looks like that witch is coming tumbling down the sky. Out of the moonlit sky, a dark cloaked figure came tumbling down to the ground. The witch, along with her broom, landed in a garden next to a small white farmhouse, and it was the farmhouse of the widow Minnow Shaw. When the widow found her, she was scared, but she's a good woman. So she helped the witch, who was all banged up and bloody, into the house. The witch set her down on the couch. Miss Minishaw set her down on the couch, and the witch asked her to pull the curtains, wrapped her cape around her, and she laid there all day and all night. She woke up at midnight. Minna was sleeping, and she went outside. She was completely healed. She went outside. She took one of the hot embers out of the fire in the fireplace. She got some straw. She yanked out some of her hair and she started a fire out in the yard. Blue flames were shooting up all over the place. And before long, there was another witch came flying around, came down next to the witch. They had a small conversation and off they flew together into the night on the other witch's broom. Well, Minna Shaw was not surprised to see that in the morning the witch was gone, but she had left her old broom. Minna figured it probably lost its magic, and it sort of looked like the broom she had in her closet for cleaning up, so she decided to hold on to it. But when she got up in the morning, the next day, she heard this noise. And she came out, and the broom was sweeping the floor all by itself. Now imagine her surprise. The broom stopped for a moment, looked at her, and then decided to continue sweeping. Well, Minna wondered, I wonder if this broom can do other things. So she wanted to see what it could do. And sure enough, it could help by feeding the chickens. It also helped with bringing the cow in from the pasture. And it could even hold an axe and chop wood. Well, you know what happened? One of the neighbors saw this one day and came over and said, Am I seeing this correctly? Is this thing really chopping wood? The broom stopped for a moment with the axe in its hand and hopped over to the neighbor. His name was Mr. Spivey, and just stared at him. And he was so scared, he ran home and he said to the widow, This is a bad thing. You shouldn't have this in your yard. This is evil. Well, come to find out, the broom could even play the piano, and once all the neighbors heard about it, they came over to watch the broom peck out one key at a time and make music. Well, Minna loved the company of the broom. She loved having the broom around the house, but the neighbors thought it was going to be a really bad thing. Once in a while, Minna would send the broom out to the road to sweep because all it wanted to do was sweep because it was a broom. So she'd send it out to the dirt road and it would be out there for hours sweeping, enjoying itself. One day, two of the Spivvy kids came across it and started teasing the broom. They started kicking rocks back in the path of the broom, and the broom just went over to another spot and kept sweeping. Well, those boys weren't going to stop there, so they had these sticks, and they came and they were tapping on the broom like this, and the broom stopped and went over to those two boys, and don't you know, she bopped them both right on top of the head, and they fell to the ground crying. Well, the boy's dog came running over, biting at the bristles. And the boy said, "Get it, get it." And the doggy grabbed on it, and it was biting it. And that broom just flung back and sent that thing, dog, flying across the sky. The dog went flying over the treetops. Well, the boys went running home and told their father, of course, and he came with some neighbors, and they decided it was enough. They had to get rid of this broom. Before I go to that, though, I want to show you the pictures. Here's the actual picture of the dog biting it. And then in this picture, if I put it really close, you can see the dog flying through the air right there. Isn't that funny? Well, like I said, the neighbors came and they were not happy. They came and said, "We came to get that broom." And Minna said, "Well, the broom is sleeping in the closet. If you open up the door very quietly and don't disturb it, you could get it. I guess it has to go. I don't want it to hurt any children." So they went into the closet really quietly and they got the broom, and they had a stake, and they tied with rope. They tied a rope around the broom onto the stake. They drove the stake into the ground, started a fire, and burned the broom up to nothing but cinders, which are little pieces of fine wood dust. The men left for the night. Here's the picture after they burned it, and Minna looks very sad, doesn't she? Oops, wrong side. Here we go. See it burning up there? Well, life soon returned to normal, but the Spivvies even found their dog. It was hungry in a tree, stuck somewhere in a tree, and he was okay, though he didn't get hurt. But one morning, Minna Shaw called her neighbors with terrifying news. She saw the ghost of the broom walking in the woods. Now, Mr. Spivvy and the other neighbors said, "This is ridiculous. That can't be true." But sure enough, that night, Mr. Spivvy looked out in the full moon, and he saw the broom's white ghost walking around, circling his house. The next night it came back, it got even closer, and the third night it actually started knocking on Mr. Spivvy's door. Here's a picture of it. Well, the next morning, Mr. and Mrs. Spivvy packed up their dearest possessions and all 8 of their children into their wagon. They tried to convince the widow to go with them, but she chose to stay behind in her little farmhouse. She went down the road as the wagon pulled away and waved goodbye to her neighbors. "You are a brave woman," shouted Mr. Spivvy as they drove away. That night, when the widow fell asleep by the hot fire, she got a gentle tap on her shoulder. The broom, not a ghost at all, but covered in white paint that Minna Shaw had painted it, put another log on the fire, went over to play a tune on the piano. "You play so nicely," said Minna Shaw to the broom. She smiled. It wasn't a ghost at all, but it was covered with the white paint. The end. Now, why do you think Minna Shaw decided to paint the broom white? And what broom did they burn if the magic witch's broom was still in the house? This is what's called a trickster tale. And what Minna did is tricked her neighbors. She took her old broom and put it in the closet so that when they came, they thought that was the witch's broom. But she took the witch's broom and painted it white to scare the neighbors. Now, why do you think she'd want to scare them? And I'll let you know why. Because she knew they would never leave her alone if they knew that broom was still there. And she scared those spivvies away, and they moved away because Minna wanted the broom to stay forever. And she did it. That's what we call a trickster tale. I hope you enjoyed the story of the widow's broom, boys and girls. Have a happy Halloween.